I'm Sonja Leboš, and I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I picked Thomas Haemmerlijem's film last year at the Architecture Film Festival in Rotterdam. Hi, Thomas.
Hi.
How are you?
Very happy to be in Zagreb. Well, virtually.
Really?
Yes,
that's great.
yes.
That's really nice.
Yes.
Tell us something about yourself.
Oh, good question. What could that be? I'm, in French, you say un touche-à-tout, someone who does lots of things. So when I was young, I was very radical activist on the left. I became a journalist because I thought if people would know the right stuff, we would live in a better world. I got a bit cynical about that. I have lived in many places all over the world, not only the cities you see in the film. I've also lived, for example, I was in Saigon for a certain time. I was in Buenos Aires for a certain time. I have traveled quite a lot in Eastern Europe. And I always like this because Switzerland for me is just too small. And these days I try to survive with my family who is doing art and documentaries and communication and lots of things.
You also hold a platform together with your friends that fights nationalists, conservatives.
The thing is a bit, the thing is, in Switzerland, we vote about 5 times per year, right? 5 times per year, we have lots of issues. You vote on a national level about big issues, about formal issues. You vote on the level of the canton Zurich, the bigger part of Zurich, and you vote on the community level. And the thing is that every group can, with 100,000 signatures, provoke any vote they want. And so the National Conservatives are again and again and again trying to cut the treaties we have with the European Union. We are not a member of the European Union, but we have these treaties, and you, for example, as a citizen of the European Union, if you have a job, you just can come to Switzerland and live here. And that's what the National Conservatives hate. They don't want neither you, nor any Germans, nor Austrians, nor Italians. And one of the things I noticed was that many of my friends in the art scene and at the time when we founded this, there was the techno scene was quite new. They were flabbergasted when they saw the results, meaning when the other side was winning. And when I asked them, many of them told me they hadn't voted, right? So my idea was to have an instrument to help people to vote. And the idea was that it would be from the far left to an open-minded, liberal, bourgeois, capitalist side of politics, but to have all these people ready when you are voting for big stuff.
And how it is going?
Quite well. We just adapted the whole thing, and I know that in Zurich there are, I don't know, maybe 8,000, maybe 10,000 people who more or less vote what we explained and they.
Fantastic work. I think it's very important in nowadays European Union, right? Okay, so tell me, what was the main motivation behind your film?
Same thing. I mean, as you can see, you know, I'm engaged in 2 campaigns, and both campaigns were directed against this tentative to really cut our ties with the European Union. And while doing that, I was traveling a lot around Switzerland. I had lots of speeches. And there were 2 things I noticed. One was this strange formula of density stress. In German, this is Dichtestress. And the interesting thing is, if you go to Germany or to Austria, no one has a clue what you're talking about. So it's really a word that popped up in Switzerland as a means of the other side. And then I published a book in order to have journalists use this word less, because if you're fighting politically, how you frame the debate is very important. Words are very important. And the second thing I noticed was that in big cities like Zurich or Geneva, housing was a huge problem. And if I wanted to convince people that it's right, that Switzerland as a rather affluent society would say everyone who finds a job in Switzerland can live here, you had to have answers what you do on the side of living. And so I came to be interested in the whole discussion with gentrification, with the production of houses. And maybe a second thing was that as I have lived in rather huge cities around the world, in São Paula, Paris, and so on, I had a bit different perspective on how cities should build. And these two things in the end, on one side saying Switzerland does not have too many people, it's not full, and on the other side, we should densify our cities. These were the two main objectives. And in the first moment, I wanted to make a purely political film, and my producer convinced me to make it personal because it's more entertaining.
Yeah, I think actually that you were following this feminist principle, you know, like you talk about yourself and you're making it political. So this is one of the reasons I appreciate it a lot, because I think every statement brings more weight if it's personally political, and you give lots of statement about yourself and what you think about society, and you're auto-ironical at the same time. So at the very beginning, you use this metaphor with tupaya. That is really gross scene, of course, of these animals devouring their youngsters, right?
Yes.
But somehow it made me think that even my generation, you and me, so people who are in their 50s, not to mention my parents, right, who are in the 70s and 80s, that we are spending lots of resources for future generation. For example, I don't know, my daughter who is in her 30s, or for your children who are probably around about 10 now or something like that. So how do you personally feel about it? Do you feel guilty when you spend, when you know that every piece of plastic will stay around? So how do you deal with it? I mean, certainly it's different in Switzerland or in Germany that brings its trash somewhere else, right? Than in Thailand or in, I don't know, Malaysia, in the countries which actually take in that trash from well-off countries.
The thing is a bit that when I was young, I was the most moralistic person you can imagine. I was dying. I mean, I remember when I was 16, I was with my girlfriend. At the time, we went to Barcelona. It was a time before you had luggage with
rollers,
tires. You had to carry the bullshit. It was very hot, and I forced myself and her to walk around the city because I was against the idea of using a taxi. I thought it's bad, it's consumption, blah 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 blah. And these days I'm a bit more relaxed, and I do believe, I mean, high respect if people try to do the right thing in their personal lives, but in the end, we won't be able to solve our global problems on an individual level. So, you know, I try to do this and that, but I have learned that we are all full of contradictions, and you have to learn to deal with contradictions. And in the end, if you want to have real change, you need political solutions and not only solutions on a personal level.
On an individual level, yeah. So in the film, you list 4 reasons for expelling modernism: conservation, urban sprawl, alienation, and anti-modernism. And it brought me to thinking about the last one. So that hippie movement that preceded that punk generation that we belonged to in the 80s, or techno that came later. So hippie movement was paradoxically both about anti-modernism, so living on the farm, living together in tribal families and so on. But it was also about degrowth, which has become quite a buzzword recently. So does degrowth carries the meaning in Switzerland, but not on the right wing that doesn't want cities to grow, but does it?
The idea of have less growth or even shrink the economy. This is an idea that is very small, but it's existing. And I remember having been invited to some discussions to quarrel about it. Now, what if we are talking about growth or degrowth as two concepts, I do believe what is wrong is this old idea that the growth of GDP is always great. If you destroy a cathedral and make a parking space, you grow your GDP. And but we would all agree, I guess, it's not something that would make anybody happier. So the old idea of GDP is quite probably a wrong idea. Still, I do believe that in order to solve most of our problems, we need a certain growth. And for me, the key word would not be degrowth, but the circular economy. The idea that what we produce doesn't have so many negative effects on people, on the environment, and so on and so on. And then there's just one thing that is quite important. I mean, if you look at the global level, the growth of population is still fierce, and it will be for a certain time. And you can show sociologically in every society, after you have satisfaction of certain needs, the curve is going down. You need a satisfaction of education. You need a satisfaction of retirement plans, stuff like that. So I do believe we can't make it without growth, but we need another type of growth and another idea of quality.
Yeah, that's interesting thought, the degrowth and circular economy. So for me, the central, yeah?
You tell me if I talk too much, but may I talk about hippies?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me talk about hippies. I mean, I don't know who has seen it, but I guess it's quite interesting that just came a film out, the Chicago 7, about a process in '68 when the yippies were revolting in Chicago. Now the yippies, they were like the militant part of the hippies. They liked to take drugs, they had the long hair, but they were very militant. And the yippies were, for me, super important when I was 16 for this, and they were super important for this very militant movement in Zurich. And the reason why I'm talking about, and it's still really worth to read it, because the leaders of the yippies, they had studied modern ways of communication, how we communicate with images, and adopted stuff that is still workable if you're in a revolt today. Later in the 80s, the acronym yippies was turned into yuppies. Yuppies were young urban professionals, people who were earning much or were showing off with their plots. And now the latest thing is the yimbies, and this is a movement, if you can call it like that. The movement I love in San Francisco, started in San Francisco. You will find about it if you type about 7 times the word build, 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 build into the New York Times search mask. And they are saying the Yindis are, yes, in my backyard, and they are trying to force real estate developers to build more space. And they have more or less the same idea that I'm propagating in my film. They are saying, in order to resolve the housing crisis in a place like San Francisco, where you have a constant influx of people who want to work in the tech industry, you have to build, 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 build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this construction business is also a huge polluter. Yeah, I think
that is true, but there's one quite. I mean, there are two things. If you agree that people have to live somewhere, right? So you have to say you just have to produce enough housing for everybody. Now you can say, okay, they live outside. If you fight against having a higher San Francisco, they might live outside of San Francisco. Still, you have to pollute to build houses. And one thing for sure, even if you build in a not very ecological way, cities are the most ecological way of living. And the second thing is a very interesting trend is that more and more very up-to-date architects are starting to build with wood. You know, now even small skyscrapers, I don't know whether you call it skyscraper, houses that are 60 meters high, that are completely built out of wood. And if you build with wood, you have a certain amount of CO2 built into your in your house. So it's the contrary of using concrete, where you produce more CO2.
That's definitely very interesting. I didn't know about that movement. I'll look into it. Construction with wood. I mean, Japanese people, Japanese architecture is fantastic with that. Yeah. Okay. That's brought us maybe to this central part of your film, which is about this movement. And you mentioned this film that was very important for your generation, that the city is burning.
Yes.
I couldn't find that film, so could you tell us a little bit more about that film? And also, how do you look at that movement nowadays? Because we have this picture of Switzerland as a fantastic Arcadia where everything is fine. People go around, carry bags with money, and everybody works in banks and so on, right? Especially in Croatia, because Croatia wanted to be Switzerland. You know, that was the story, that was the narrative that were politicians were selling to Croatian people at the beginning of the 90s. We'll be like Switzerland, you know. So, and you show this, I don't know, whole nexus of conflicts going on. Young people don't have place to live. They demonstrate. Right-wingers to throw Molotov cocktails at them. So,
well, I mean,
what happened?
Talking about the film was very interesting because it was shot at the time with VHS. So you needed two persons, one with the VHS camera, then you had a long cable, and behind the second person with a recorder this big. And interesting was also that the very critical left-wing generation of the 60s, they didn't want to show the film at their festivals because they said this is not film, you know, video VHS is not film. So it was also it had this generational touch. Now to quickly finish off the housing part, this is why I showed the film. You have there inside something which I see today as something I see as rather reactionary. The idea that only old houses have a soul, only old houses are good. And this is a bit something that works in a society that has the same size and is not growing. Then you can work with that, and then you can fight or discuss over who is getting these houses. But if you have a growing society, you have to produce, and this is the part that Zurich is not seeing. Now, what concerns the idea of Switzerland, Switzerland was mingling through World War II. It wasn't with the Nazis, but it wasn't also really against the Nazis. I mean, most people in Switzerland didn't like the Nazis, but Switzerland was selling arms. They were dealing with gold and so on and so on. And then the moment the war was over, Switzerland turned this story, and I grew up with the idea that we were the only country in Switzerland that wasn't invaded by the Nazis because we had the best warriors, because we had the best army and so on. I mean, it was a pure lie and total bullshit. And for a long time, Switzerland was a very corporative society where the heads of society, all men, they were at the same time, they were most of the time academics. They had a position in a big company or had their own company, and all of them were officers. And they went every year for 3 or 4 weeks. They went to the army, was also a very important network. And it was a given that the secretaries in all these companies were working for free for Swiss Army. So Switzerland was very much into the Cold War and was a very closed society. In 1979, we had demonstrations because we had only 2 radio shows that had pop music. And there was one guy who was trying from Italy to send radio waves with very soft pop, not crazy pop, soft pop to Zurich. And we had huge manifestations because we wanted to do pop music, and the government was against it. And at the time, if you had long hair, if you liked to listen to pop music, it was all very wrong. So it was not Germany where you had GIs and cool music stations, it was Switzerland. And this was still, until a certain extent, in vigor when this movement in 1980 started. And yes, it was very militant, and Switzerland had huge problems. And afterwards, the repression of the police had the effect that many people started to use heroin. So we had a huge heroin problem in Switzerland, which in the end led to a very pragmatic policy that these days, if you're a heavy heroin addict, you get your heroin from the state for free, so you don't have to go and nick off old ladies. So this helps with criminality.
Yeah,
but
it's a nice way to pacificate youth. You just give them cheap. It's a nice way to pacificate youth. You just give them.
Well, sure, but no, the thing is really I mean, it wasn't seen like that. But yes, you can say on the other side, you can say, if you don't pacificate them, I mean, I saw lots of people in my generation who died either of AIDS or of heroin, and both was had to do one.
Yeah, same here.
Because people weren't changing needles. And then one effect was that especially Zurich started to have a huge cultural politics. I would say it was more a pacification by giving space to alternative culture, which in the end also changed society, but it wasn't as militant as it was before. And one of the things you have to say about militant movements, there are hardly any, unless you put it really on a military level, like the guerrilla warfare in Latin America, there are hardly any movements where you can keep up a very militant fight for more than 5 years. All of a sudden you say, okay, I want kids, or I want to study, or whatever, and the repression is taking its toll, so it tones down a bit. But Switzerland is not a place where people walk around with money. We have our share of poor. I mean, in general, the social system in Switzerland works quite well. One of the things I would say really works very well in this country is the legal system. It has its flaws as well, but in general, you don't have to be rich in order to get your rights. And if you're rich, you can't expect that you get away with everything. And this is a huge advantage for a society. And then as we can vote about everything, we have lots of discussions about political problems, which also sometimes help.
Yeah, you showed that situation from 1989, when actually this real estate bubble burst, right? And then you made this equation, 1991 equal 2008 in the USA. So were there really so many evictions in Switzerland?
No. I mean, it had also a polemical side. What was the same thing was that you had this exuberance, you had this huge bubble, this speculation, and the thing was that really people were getting super rich by buying a house on Friday and selling it on Monday, and quite often it wasn't even in the books. And all of a sudden this was gone, but the biggest toll, if you talk on the housing side, were taking the huge house owners, the banks were taking a huge toll, the taxpayers, because there are these cantonal banks, they were going to burn at the time $2 billion, which was lots of money. And Switzerland, or the big part of the population, was paying a huge price because we had a recession for almost 10 years.
Okay. So perhaps somebody from the audience has any questions? No? Okay, no questions for audience. And tell me about Tbilisi. I was there also in 2017, I think. It is a fantastic city, and I hope they wouldn't enter the European Union.
Explain, why is that?
Because I don't know, they would lose all this fantastic food and everything with the European Union, just like we in Croatia are losing it, right? So, and there is this sentence that I found really fantastic and applicable to our situation in ex-EU countries. Today's rulers do not want their predecessors to enjoy any recognition. So this is something that we really feel here. Everything what is socialist doesn't count. It doesn't really matter. So how is the situation in Tbilisi today? You probably still are trying to maintain your property there.
Funny thing first is that what I meant by this sentence, I wasn't talking about the socialist time, I was talking about Saakashvili. Now, Saakashvili was a neoliberal who did certain things right. He did certain, I mean, the hugest thing he did was that he rooted out the corruption on a small level, meaning that I bought an apartment, I had a renovation, I never had to pay one dime to anybody to do that. And this is thanks to Saakashvili. And he also brought them more freedom. Now, referring to the question about the heritage of socialism, I would be on your side, even if I'm very anti-communist, because I have been a Marxist in my time. I have read tons of books about the Stalinistic repression, the repression afterwards. I mean, if you look at the history of Georgia, the great avant-garde, they all ended up murdered by the socialist state. And I remember when I was at a Venice biennial, where the curator had someone read Marx the whole day. All my friends from Georgia, all the artists from Georgia, they hated him. They thought, you have no clue what you're talking about. Still, I do really believe that a big error is to just skip all the socialist heritage. And you can see it in my film that number one, together with Alina Boyka, I'm the guy who was documenting all the mosaics. And the second thing, which is now a bit more common in PDD, there are more people who see this, is that I really like socialist brutalism, which is quite important. And thinking about this talk tonight, I also think it was really great that there was this exhibition in MoMA. And I do believe that part of what I'm saying, I mean, I have to make a quick parenthesis. I do know that many things I say in my film sound on the first moment very apoplectic, and it's much too easy. City development is always much more complex than what I am talking about in the film. Still, I insist that it's right that we should think from the side of producing more space. Still, I do believe it's right that we should re-evaluate modernism. And there, I do believe that part of the Yugoslavian heritage comes in handy. And you know, I don't know about the specifics of Zagreb, but I do believe it would be worse if you're talking about stuff like that, not only to protect stuff that is important in the old city, but also to see this heritage as something that is not totally wrong. What happens now?
Hey, Thomas.
Hello.
Hello. Well, now it's good, actually.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
Yeah, now it's functioning fantastically. So my last question was about this the last sentence from your film, which says, "If you know what gentrification is, then you were part of it." So, do you really think there is no exemption? I mean,
no. It's really funny. I mean, I have a friend I lost because of this joke. In the end, it's just
you lost a friend because of that joke. What kind of friend?
Yeah, somebody in Berlin, and the phrase was coined by Maren Harnack. She is a professor in Frankfurt. Was very important for my thinking for this film. And it's a bit a joke, you know. It is making fun of the fact that in many places all over the world, you got these highly educated kids who say, "Oh, it's horrible, the working class is going out, and we come in with our gallery, with our communal space, whatever." Yeah. And yes, you have there, I mean, you know, this also this whole cultural wars in the United States with all the losers in the working class who are going to the right. You have the assumption that sure it's a joke. It's a joke, and I mean absolutely clear. You have also a highly educated precariat, which sometimes is kicked out by gentrification. No, the sentence is wrong. It's just a joke, which normally works quite well, at least in German or Swiss cinema.
Yeah, I like the fact that you actually shown yourself as a victim and of gentrification and as gentrifier. So it is possible to be both. And I think that is what you said, that we have to be careful about contradictions that we carry as professionals and living in the cities. And of course, trying to provide solidarity with co-citizens. Thomas, thank you so much. I hope that we will be able to greet you in Zagreb in person, right?
I would be delighted, and if everyone has a question or a shout, you'll find me easily on the internet. I'm very happy, and also if you think what I say is total bullshit, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Best greetings to Zurich.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. I'm gonna finish.